One Question is designed to give subscribers valuable insights on how executive leaders in college athletics think about key issues on their respective campuses, in their departments, or within their leagues and conferences.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown and welcome to One Question. I'm here at the 2018 NCAA Convention and I'm joined by Dan Schumacher. He's the Director of Athletics at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. Greetings, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Dan, you've been at a number of institutions in the leadership role, the Director of Athletics. You were at a Division II school, Lewis University, which had a Division I sport. You were also at Chicago State, is a Division I school, and now you're at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, which is a Division III school. And each school you've been at, where it was Lewis and you had to deal with possibly getting close to the death penalty and a number of violations. Chicago State, you had to focus on academics. Now you're here at Eau Claire and you're looking at facilities. How do you process, or when you go in to interview for a job and decide whether you're going to take it, and then when you take it, look at everything surrounding the job to determine if it's something you want to take on to fix the problems that you may see in the job you decide to take?
Well, anytime you're on a job interview, the first thing, and I've been on a few apparently because I have a little bit of a resume, but I think leadership above you, above that pay grade, that chancellor, that president is so important. I would say it's the number one. It might have taken me 3 jobs to figure that out. And I'm humbly saying that. And it is so important. I'm in a good place right now where I got a great leader, someone that trusts me, I trust them. In some of my other situations where I've been at D2 and D1, fixing those type of compliance issues or academic situations, I also was dealt a hand where the leadership of those universities were new to that too. And so we were both training each other, so the trust wasn't there as 100% as you'd like it. And being an AD, when you look around, you got to look and see where the presidential or chancellor support's going to be. 2, where does the culture of the campus itself, how do they value athletics? Ask people, ask questions. And then 3, make sure you take mental notes on your interview, such as, in my interview process at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, the athletic offices itself were shared with kinesiology department. Right away I walk in and said, that's not going to work. We need our own brand, our own identity. Lucky at the time that the old College of Education on Lower Campus became available because the College of Education moved into a new building. So we wound up remodeling, and now I'm adjacent to Zorn Arena, our basketball arena, and we have our main administrative offices with the basketball offices and other coaches. And it's a whole new presentation, and it's our own presentation. And that was my idea on an interview when I saw it, when I took the full campus tour. So you constantly got to be looking for the angles and where you see the deficencies and where you see some bright spots.
For lack of a better word, you've done repair jobs, right?
Sure.
At schools like Chicago State. If you know your history, when you arrived at Chicago State, there were some academic problems with student athletes. I'd imagine it's something that may have came up in an interview, and then when you got on campus, you realized the depth of what the problem was. How do you process that when you're going to take this job on? You know you want to go in, and you're like, okay, here's the problem, and then you realize it might be a little deeper than what you initially thought.
Oh, it's always deeper than what you initially think.
Exactly.
It's never what it really seems. I don't care what school, what situation you take over. But at Chicago State was a unique situation. I'm from the south side of Chicago. I was at Lewis University, which is based outside of Chicago. It was an opportunity to move from Division II to full-time Division I. I saw some opportunities there. There was a presidential change. But it just... the state funding system with the state of Illinois and their way of funding higher education just hampered any things we tried to get done in a big way. But the low-lying fruit there, just like the office work at Eau Claire, is that the first thing you had to fix at Chicago State was you had to have teams eligible for postseason. And if you don't have your academics and your APR in line, you're not eligible for postseason. And so how do you sell a kid about a championship experience or a total athletic experience if you don't have them eligible for their conference championship or a national championship in the NCAA postseason. So the first thing we had to fix was academics. Let's make sure the academics is taken care of. So then once we knew that we were going to have kids that we can count on each semester after each semester because they're getting it done in the classroom, then we can start worrying about the athletic prowess and how good we're going to get. And by the time I left, that's where we were starting to focus. New baseball stadium, made some new hires. And Coach Dildy had just come off the Great West before we moved into the WAC with a championship. So we had some good momentum, but when funding, and we were subsidized so heavily by the state of Illinois as a state school, and at the Division I level, it's an expense, as everybody knows.
Well, I'm sure that when you even look at a job, if you get called for it, you have to assume that there's probably a problem that needs to be solved there.
Yeah.
Right? And so coming into Eau Claire and the facility, did you know that before you visited campus, or how did you?
I did not know that before you visited campus. It was alarming to me, shocking to me, UW-Eau Claire being in the best conference in the country, arguably. Nobody's won more national championships than the WIAC. It's such a highly competitive, I equate it more to a Division II league. That's the type of level of athlete that's in there. What I didn't know is that the last time they built an athletic facility was 1952. I didn't know that till I walked on the campus and I asked enough questions and somebody volunteered that information. Probably wasn't something they wanted to volunteer, wasn't a selling point to take the job, but that subject matter was broached on that interview, and that was like, okay. But you also have to look at it this way. All you can do is go up. So it became an opportunity instead of hindered. Just as moving from Lewis to Chicago State, there was an opportunity there. Learned a lot of great professional experience I've learned there through redoing the academics and, working at a unique institution. And then Lewis at the same time working for the private school, the Catholic Church, and its politics and how things work. And so it's been a great progress, and it prepared me usually for what I'm confronting now, which is the best. I think it's the funnest part of an AD's job, going out and raising money and building things. Because most people are capitalistic. They like to see brick and mortar, and I think ADs are pretty much that way too. And so I finally get to focus on stuff that's really going to make a difference in kids' lives and going to make a difference at the university.
Right, and that's very important. And for people who aspire to be athletic directors, or people who may be one interview away from becoming an athletic director, it sounds like your career has been, I'm not just going to take a job where there's no problems to be solved, right? I go somewhere where I can solve the problem, and by the time I leave, if you do leave, the problems that you've solved are visible and tangible in a number of different ways. Do you have any advice for anybody who wants to be an AD at some point, or maybe even be one interview or one interview question away from being an interview, or one visit to a university, site visit away from being a...
Wow, it's such a complex look at things when you think about the job interview itself. So many things can go wrong. You can say one thing wrong in a public forum or private meeting with the chancellor. It's just, I think the best advice you can get is, as much as you can, listen on the interview.
Okay.
Listen.
Because they'll tell you, right?
Yeah. It'll tell you that they'll let those people tell you the story. And I think you just have to know when is the right time to respond. And that's the key to a smooth interview and smooth sailing through it, where you can start to have some common ground with some people. And, of course, the most important person in that hiring process is that relationship with the chancellor or the president.
Right.
And so, listening. Listening is a big one. It's no different than in everyday life and trying to solve problems on campuses. I wouldn't be able to solve problems if I'm not listening and trying to figure out. And then also be humble. Be humble and say, hey, I can't do the job alone. I can't do everything. So you got to make sure you're the smartest guy in the room to get the best person to help you, assist you in that rebuilding process or whatever that job task will be. And you need that support from the institution.
Right. And I'd imagine the listening that you've done well allows you to hear when somebody says something that may just be a problem that they may not think is a problem, but it's something you can go in and solve.
And I know we focused on jobs I've taken, but there's jobs I haven't taken because of those things of what I've heard and what I saw. Everything from conduct and how the interview process went, how organized they were, different things like that. I mean, if you go to your AD meeting and they're late picking you up from the hotel for your morning interview, or people aren't there the committee members are not there on time, or whatever the snafu, I mean, you usually can tell if it's run right. The institutions probably run the same way. So, I mean, there's some observance and some experiences that I had where I've turned down jobs because of those experiences on the interview, withdrawn from positions.
Well, that's excellent. I mean, it's went from talking about the problems you solved to actually the underlying thing is evaluating whether you want to take a job or not when you go to the interview. It isn't just you being interviewed. You're also
I'm interviewing them, man.
as eyes and
it's
ears
as
open.
just as much.
As
You're right on that, man. That's the key one. I mean, in the more interviews you go on, I always tell my associate ADs, go on as many interviews as you can to get the experience. So you're used to it, you know what to expect, and you can be so much better the next time around. I mean, the experiences I got in the interview process allowed me the latitude to make different decisions on which jobs I wanted and which jobs I didn't. Just because I kept getting more interviews and people were seeking me out and I would talk to them, that doesn't always mean that you're going to take the job. But it's a great experience there too. And there's also, to say no to something, say no to a job because you've got a better situation, that's okay too. I've done that the last 4 years now being at UW-Eau Claire. People go, why'd you leave Division I to go Division III? And I've had many phone calls for opportunities. Once you find that good place, though, it's okay to stay and be the difference maker and turn the thing around. And 20 years from now, you go, look at what I created, since it didn't happen since 1952.
Exactly right. Tangible results. And you don't want to be the athletic director or the leader that's chasing rabbits that you'll probably
Correct.
never catch.
That's
right?
correct.
Well, I appreciate it. This has been very enlightening, and I think there are a lot of things here that people can take away from in terms of evaluating, in terms of interviewing, and in terms of solving problems. Thank you very much for joining us today on One Question.
Thank you.
That was Dan Schumacher. He is the Director of Athletics at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of One Question is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.